Hi,
Hi
uh,
everyone. Hello.
hi. So Patrick is currently an entrepreneur in residence and senior consultant at Roland Berger, Europe's largest management consulting firm, supporting governments, corporations, and NGOs in developing their strategies for the future. Before this, he was a general manager at EMAAR, builder of the world's tallest building and the world's largest mall, supporting strategic projects across their properties, malls, entertainment, and hotels divisions. He has built, ran, and exited two startups, a home sharing startup, and a co working upstart. In his free time, he enjoys vagabonding, biohacking, and stoic philosophy. So, hi, Patrick, passing the floor now to you.
All right. Hi everyone. Hope your afternoons are going well. Let me just share my screen. All righty. Let me know if you guys can see it.
Yep, we see it.
Fantastic. Magandang umaga sa lahat. Hello everyone. If you guys are okay, I'll do a bit of Taglish. I think it's gonna make it more fun and I guess also helps me practice my Filipino because it's been so long since I've actually spoken a lot of Filipino. Um, but very happy to be here. Salamat sa inyong lahat. And today I'm going to give you a talk about this concept called 83,200 hours, right? Which is designing your career. The reason why it's 83,200 hours is, if you think about a normal job, you work in a normal job for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, for about 40 years of your life. So if you do the multiplication, it's 83,200 hours that you have to think about. So yeah, we're going to talk about this large part of your life and how you could think about designing it. Before that, I thank Bea for already giving me an intro. But a bit about me. So I went to NYU for college, also took some courses at the Harvard Graduate School of Design for city building, because I was in a EMAAR for very long. It's like kind of like a property development company that helps build up cities. But also, I'm a proud Filipino. I went to Xavier in San Juan. So, guys, yeah, very good memories from way before. And as Bea has kind of ran you through, I also worked in kind of large international corporations, built and ran my own startups. So yeah, lots of good stuff there too. And then finally, in terms of kind of my life, I kind of do lots of crazy stuff in the sense that I like Broadway a lot. Very big fan of musicals. I do read a lot of philosophy. That's kind of my outlet. And one cool fun fact about me was that one of my startups which is a home sharing startup. I actually was able to get the my logo or my company's kind of ad on the world's tallest building, which is here on the right. So those are the things that make me happy and kind of keep me excited. Yeah, so that's done about me. Halas, we're over. Let's move on to the topic of today's talk, which is designing a career for your life. And I think quite simply, there's three kind of key messages that are really important about thinking about this question, right? So the first is start with why, and we'll kind of double click and deep dive into it a bit. The second is find your center. And then third is kind of visualize the future. And I think if you leverage these three strategies, they really help you kind of think about, how best to design a career, especially because I think for a lot of you, you're starting out in your careers, nagsisimula pa lang, there's a lot of things that you have to think about. And I think this will provide a bit of structure for you so that like you can take this and kind of continuously apply this to kind of your life. So let's start with the first one. Start with why. When I was a kid, there was this very nice Nescafe ad, that they posted long ago. Maybe I was like, 10 years old. So maybe you guys are younger, so I'm old now. But it was a very funny ad that said, "Bakit ka bumabangon sa umaga? Why do you wake up in the morning?" And I think what's really interesting about how we think about careers, especially in the Philippines, and then also many other places, is we always start with the what, and then the how, and then the why. Like growing up, like people will tell you, gusto ko maging doktor. Paano? I'm going to go to medical school. And then you get to the why, and people are like, okay, why exactly do I want to be a doctor, right? So I think that's kind of the big problem in the way we think about careers. Like we always start with the what, the how, and the why. And I think what we have to do is to kind of change up the sequence, right? Where we start inside out, where we say, why? I mean, what's my why? And then how do I get to the why? And then what is the resulting what, right? So the what is the result, not the cause. So let me give you an example. For example, like for me, like what really, kind of makes me wake up in the morning, or bakit ako bumabangon sa umaga, is I love it when people can experience like new technologies, like when people we can improve people's lives through letting them experience kind of new innovations in science, technology, and engineering. Like that's I get super excited when that happens, right? So how do I do that? Well, I need to then know kind of a lot of computer science. I need to know a lot of technology. I need to be kind of in this space, in the ecosystem. And so the what is, oh, now I'm an entrepreneur in residence, and I kind of support companies in digitizing their streams, right? So that I'm able to kind of very quickly, kind of propagate these new ideas, right? So I think that's how you should think about, your careers. You start with the why, and then you kind of go to the how, and then to the what. I think one thing that's important to note here is that let this be dynamic. Like I didn't know that I was going to end up, for example, in Dubai and do it here. But I think that's one aspect of this kind of golden circle, as you call it, that you should be kind of very open about, which is, have your why, your how, and what, but make sure that you don't say that it's locked in, and that you allow yourself to make it dynamic, right? Because it can change over time. It can change because of different contexts. And I think being open to that is very, very important. So I think that's the first message. Start with the why. The second message is finding your center. So I work in management consulting. This is very funny, like saying when you're in consulting, the key question is what constitutes success, or what is success, right? Because unless you can kind of define it, it's hard to then know whether you've reached it or you're even close to reaching it, right? What your dream career is. And so the Japanese have this very interesting concept called Ikigai. So let me explain it to you. So you have here in the center, kind of 4 large circles, right? So you have what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and kind of what the world needs. And if you only have 2 of them together, you have kind of these very nice kind of career steps, I would say, that kind of helps you towards getting to your dream kind of career. Like, for example, if you put together what you love and what you're good at, it's kind of a passion, right? Put together what you're good at and what you can be paid for, it's a profession, right? When you have what the world needs and what you can be paid for, it's a vocation. And if you do what you love and what the world needs, it's a mission, right? But kind of the magic sauce, let's say, is Ikigai, right? This thing in the center where you can actually put together all those different aspects. And I think that's very, very important to remember that, as you think about kind of the careers, the whys, the hows, and the whats, you have to ask yourself, is this something I love? Is this something I'm good at? Is this something I can be paid for? And is this something that the world needs, right? And when you have those 4 ticked, then you kind of like, okay, I found my center. I kind of know what success looks like and how I can kind of move forward. I think 2 interesting things to note here is that there's no right answer, and you might not have all 4, right? You might only have 2 or 3 at one time, but I think striving towards the 4 is what's really, really important. And the second is you really have to balance like your idealism and your realism. I think when we're younger, we really have this idea that you can do everything you want in the world and be whoever you want. And I think it's a very important thing to have, but there's also the reality of our societies and how we live. And I think it's important that we also remember that like not everything is going to happen, So, and I think that's really important. I think one last note on this is that, like, when we think about the Ikigai, it's important to kind of add in your internal, external kind of luck factors to think about what exactly, are part of these circles, right? And then what I also like doing for myself is I like to validate my Ikigai, or what I love or what the world needs, with like biographies from, like, for example, there's this nice book called Shoe Night about the Nike founders, which I love reading. I also do info interviews where I ask like people who've done a similar career to say, hey, I want to do this. Does this make sense? Like, is this something that actually I could do? And that's always helped me. And then finally, research, right? Lots of books, articles, kind of blogs, and even like social media posts that you could read that sometimes give you a view towards the career that you kind of want to achieve. So yeah, so that's the second. Asking yourself, what is success, and then finally, we have the third pillar, which is visualizing the future. So how do I get there? So in step 1, we kind of thought about what's your why, right? In the second step, we then looked at what's the Ikigai, what is this kind of job that you want to do, or this career. And the third step is to then visualize that career, right? Is to say, okay, now I know why I'm doing it, like what I'm going to do. how do I do it, right? And I think the way to do it is to come up with a very visual kind of path. So Stanford University has this kind of framework called the Odyssey Plan, where you basically have a 5-year plan of kind of what you want to do. It doesn't have to be locked in or anything, but the idea is that like you actually have different, let's say, like stages, and you do multiple like plans, right? So you do a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and then from there you can start to visualize actually what your life could look like depending on what career you actually take, right? And so yeah, I mean, I'll leave you guys to Google it up. It's there are many templates online to do this, but I think it's very important that you visualize it, because it will inform your how again, and it will inform your what again, it will inform your why again, right? So it's a never kind of ending feedback loop, but these are tools that can really help you. I think 2 notes here. One is that it's very important to check in and course correct frequently, like, because as with everything in life, it's very dynamic. So you have to come in and see whether what you thought about yourself, let's say 6 months ago, is still the same today. Maybe it's not, and you have to kind of course correct. But if not, then it's good, then you can just kind of go on. I think that's important. And I think what the other thing that I do for myself is that I always like have like a KPI or a key performance indicator, right? I know it's very like businessy, but the idea is that like, I always tell myself, whether it's, I don't know, the number of companies I've helped, or the number of teams I've managed, or the number of, I don't know, of people I've impacted with the things that I do. I think it's important to like have a KPI, so that like when you're thinking about important, tough questions in your life, you can actually measure yourself against it and make an easy decision for what you want to do. So yeah, that's the third thing. So I guess with these 3 kind of tools, with your start with why, find your center, and visualizing the future, I think that should give you kind of the first, let's say, toolbox to think about how you plan for the 83,200, right? And if I could leave you with one last message, beyond all of these structures, beyond all of these like the frameworks, I still go back to Steve Jobs, right? In the Stanford speech, he had this very nice like quote called "Stay hungry, stay foolish," and I always wondered where that came from. Like the real page from the book. So the other day I googled it up and I saw it here, and I was like, it's when you see it in its real form, I think it's really cool that it's really about staying hungry and staying foolish, right? Like that, like beyond kind of all of what life kind of gives you, because there are many things in life that you can't predict and you can't kind of plan for, right? But if you stay hungry, you stay foolish, you stay ready for the adventure, I think that's a kind of spirit that will bring you on, whatever happens in your career. Yeah. So yeah, I think those are my tiny words of wisdom, if they are wisdom, for you today. I hope that was helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. Bea has been disconnected, so she'll be back. But thank you for that. It was incredibly insightful. So now, participants, you can feel free to put your questions on the chat or directly share them with myself. But yeah, maybe to start, Patrick, could you share a little bit about how you exactly found your Ikigai? Like what was the process for you on that? And yeah, what would you say were some of the turning points or important milestones for you to be able to find yours?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I think for me, one of the biggest turning points in my career was when I was a 3rd year in college. So back then, I was studying at NYU. I actually interned with Goldman Sachs. It's one of the biggest banks in the world. I got a return offer to work for them again, and then suddenly, like, I think that's when I kind of had to go through this phase of like asking myself what I really want in my life. And so at that point in time, I had this offer to join them in their London offices, and then I also had a choice to actually work for EMAAR, which is this property developer that wants to kind of go digital and like kind of build new businesses and all that. And I kind of had to think about, given kind of the why for me, which is, being able to use tech to then, help like a lot of people. How do I do that, right? And I realized, for example, with that particular decision, that if I was with EMAAR, like, I can do something that I liked, I can make money out of it. It could help people, especially because EMAAR has a lot of footprint across the Middle East. And so, that's one of the kind of places I actually thought about Ikigai and how that made sense. Because if I worked for a bank like Goldman, yes, I would build these great tools and support the financial industry. But in terms of being able to give back, for example, it's not something that would be a big part of it. So yeah, maybe that's one example.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it seems that sometimes we don't really expect to fall into certain things, or maybe like experiences actually point us in another direction, even though we've been offered a specific opportunity. That's awesome. So I got a message here privately with a question as well around for you, how do you exactly distinguish between, I guess, motivations that are more determined by outside factors and people that are not yourself versus things that you really love, right? Because obviously there are a lot of pressures and coming from parents, coming from friends, everybody. So how do you distinguish between those two things when you're trying to decide on what you want to do for your entire career?
It's a very good question, actually. I think I go back to this idea of idealism and realism, right? The world is always, let's say, shades of gray, right? It's never kind of black and white. I think usually from the parent side, and at least this is true for me, from my parents, they've always been concerned about, will you be able to take care of yourself? Will you be able to kind of, make sure that you're independent, because they want, at the end of the day, our parents, I think the biggest factor in these kind of decisions are our parents, right? They just want us to be happy, to be honest. And so I think it is a big challenge, even for me at the time when I was younger, because I remember I wanted to major in art when I was in college. And obviously my parents were like, okay, I didn't end up majoring in art, but I'll kind of tell you what happened. But basically, I think what's important is to balance the idealism and the realism. So for me, what that means is, on the one hand, the reality is that we live in a world today where we need to find skills and kind of work that actually supports society, but at the same time supports us. And I think, if you have Maslow's pyramid or hierarchy of needs, if you don't have the basic needs kind of fulfilled, it's very hard to become self-actualizer. It's very hard to be a starving artist, let's say. So I think it's important that, on the one hand, you really be very mindful about, what your parents say, because I think they also only want the best for you. And at the same time, kind of, you also have to live your life, right, on the other end of the spectrum. And so, for example, what I did was, I really wanted to be a sociology and art major in college. But obviously, from a certain extent, my parents were like, oh, ba't ka magma-major sa art? Anong gagawin mo anong gagawin mo kung maging artist ka? Sige, magutom ka dyan, So it was very funny, but also a bit sad. But then eventually, I kind of realized where they were coming from. And so what I did was I actually majored in computer science and economics, but I actually have two minors. So one in sociology and one in art, actually. So I kind of found a way to kind of balance the two, where at the end of the day, I also realized that, I want to be independent. I want to have my own life. I want to be able to take care of my family if they need me. I want to be able to be, a kind of, let's say, someone who has a more stable career, let's say. And that's not true for everyone. Some people might not want that, and it's a personal choice. But for me, I wanted those. And so that's how I kind of found an in-between for the two. I hope that helps. And I think that's what you have to do for yourself. You have to kind of find the right shade of gray for yourself,
Yeah, definitely. And having that balance is so important, as you were saying, and actually very difficult too, to try to expose your own interests and concerns, and also try to take into account other people's. But you're right in that our parents just want the best for us as well, so it's about really finding that middle ground. Great. And then I also had another question here around just general advice you would give students, as a lot of our participants here are either still in high school or college, and they're
Yeah.
really just trying to find out what interests them, what experiences give them the energy that you mentioned earlier that you need to look for. So what
Yeah.
advice would you give them? How can they actually go about doing that, especially because it's the pandemic and sometimes it's really hard to find opportunities, especially if you're a little younger and you have no experience. So yeah, how would you recommend they go about trying to figure out what they actually like doing?
Yeah. I think there are three ways to do it, right? To be able to kind of find out what you want to do. I think the first is to, and I'm going to give some practical kind of advice. The first is to speak to people. A lot of people who are in their careers, they really want to help young people. And the best way to kind of know what a career looks like is to speak to someone in that career. So there's this thing that's very common, I guess more common in the West than in the Philippines, but it's called like an informational interview. It sounds so formal, but basically what it is you just go on LinkedIn, you find someone whose career you found really, really interesting. And then, so I've done this before. So there was a tech product manager at Google that I thought his career was super interesting. So I literally went to LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I was like, hey, Phil, I came across your LinkedIn profile. It looked really, really cool. Okay, more formalized slightly, but or along the lines of, I really found your profile really, really cool. I'm intrigued by your career. I'd love to know more about what you do and how you got there, and and yeah, I would love if we could do a quick like Zoom call to discuss. And more often than not, especially if you're a student, like these people really love helping out. So I wouldn't even feel like it would be a problem if you did it. So I think that's step one. And by the way, when you do this beyond the LinkedIn network, you can also reach out to me, to other people within kind of the network to also find out like how to get there, right? And I think that's the first most important thing. The second thing is to find like internships. I have my own beef about like unpaid internships and all, but if really you're very, very junior, you don't have a lot of experience, I don't think it's that bad to shadow or like do an unpaid internship for a short amount of time, right? I think it's helpful to be able to kind of gain an insight into the inner workings of an organization that you kind of hope to become or achieve. And I think that's very, very important for you to do that, because if you see it in real life, then you actually the problem sometimes in the movies or in social media or in the way we look at the world, a lot of it is very glamorized, and you don't realize how tough the real job is or the kinds of like requirements underneath. And I think it's very important that you actually try it out, and I think internships are the best. And I think the third is to actually just like listen to yourself. I know it sounds quite crazy, but I think it's nice. I mean, I'm a very big believer in stoicism, where you kind of like take steps back and take deep breaths and kind of reflect on your day and all that. I do it a lot because I catch myself sometimes, like where I say something, but I actually think something differently. And I think it's important that you have these pauses in your days, whether it's like at night or in the morning, where you kind of review your day and then you say, oh, like, you know what, like I actually was super happy when I did this, and then that gives you kind of a further, let's say, gingerbread cookie to then go and like look for more and maybe go down further in that kind of career path or that kind of job, right? So I think those three strategies could possibly help you when kind of trying to figure out from a practical perspective what you want to do. Yeah.
Very, very actionable advice. Thank you so much for that, Patrick. We'll do one more question from Arel. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Arel. So Arel is asking, what if your Ikigai is 2 or 3 things? So they're saying like they have this passion, but through that passion can't necessarily achieve financial goals if it's the one thing that they will pursue. So is it possible to pursue the passion, what someone loves and what they're good at, while also working at a corporate job or personal business to achieve financial goals? So I guess maybe the question would be, is it possible to have 2 things at the center of your Ikigai, and is it possible to just balance as well if you really can't find that one thing that fits all of the necessary elements of that framework?
Of course, yes, for sure. I think the Ikigai is a framework, right? Like the ideal best case scenario is you have all 4, but I guess for most people in the world, they won't have all 4, right? And it's kind of like a North Star or like a kind of target point you want to get to. But of course, it'll be a path to get there, right? And if it means that you have to make choices, you have to make choices, right? So there's this concept in economics called satisficing. So you have to be satisfied with what is sufficient. Like you in our world today, we think always of maximization, right? How can I maximize like all 4, for example? But in reality, because of so much information and so many choices and so many options, it's probably not possible for you to get all 4. And that's just the reality of the world, right? So what's important is to satisfice, right? To say, given my options today, this is what I will do to satisfice myself. But then down the road, I can continue on and kind of, find ways to to kind of piece more pieces together. I also think that, you know, if you do this, and today it might not bring any financial kind of returns, but if you're really, really good at what you do, I mean, eventually you'll also get there, right? So I don't think they're necessarily like mutually exclusive in the sense that they're not separate, like they can actually like blend into each other. And honestly, I think over time they blend much more. And so I think you shouldn't just discount that as well. But maybe just to summarize it all, like I think definitely, you know, it's number one, it might not be possible to have all four, and that's fine. It's about, you know, trying to get as much as you can. And then number two, it's really about being able to balance it all and seeing how it evolves over time, because a lot of the times they kind of like overlap and you eventually get to where you want to get to. So yeah.
Such wise words. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing all of these insights with us. So one thing that we do for all of our speakers is we do a gratitude shower. So if everyone can join me in giving Patrick a gratitude shower by pouring in the chat, you know, some thank yous, some things that you loved about the things that he shared, or some hearts on emojis, just please shower him with love and thanks. Thank you so much, Patrick, for being here today and sharing with us. We've also recorded the session, so with your permission, we'd also love to share it with the rest of our students as well on our social media channels. But this has been awesome. Thank you for spending some time with us on your Saturday, and we hope to see you again. And welcome to our Kada officially. You're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you, everyone, and you guys have a great afternoon. See you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank